Exodus is the kind of game where I don't hear about it very often, and then when I do, I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds good. This game, which does have a lot of Mass Effect blood in its DNA, including the lead writer and somebody who was at the company for 22 years throughout the makings of the first trilogy, has just had a new update via a Founders Q&A. This is basically the devs answering some of the questions that people have had about this new upcoming sci-fi, sort of cinematic, narrative RPG. Now, a lot of people see this as a successor to Mass Effect in the spiritual sense, but I think it could live on its own and take some inspirations from some pretty interesting places. So let's dive into this update and see what they had to say as we get closer to the hopefully inevitable 2026 launch. First up, as I was saying, the game's influences. They take a lot of DNA in this game from Mass Effect, but they also mentioned here Horizon Zero Dawn. Now, I think Horizon has one of the best combat systems in any game out there, and you have to figure out how to balance the elements you're using, like you'd find in a lot of other games that are turn-based, like Expedition 33 being a recent example. And you have to use like fire and ice and earth to balance out what kind of enemy you're going to attack using what kind of attack. They also mentioned that some of their inspiration comes from Metroid Prime in the sense of the exploration aspect, you feeling a little bit more alone out there in space, but giving you a progression system that depends on you unlocking technology. Think of it kind of like roguelikes, basically. You go to a place, you can't get into certain places, you go and you get something new, you come back, now you can get in. Then there was also combat. So if you've watched the trailers around this game, you see that there's quite a bit of combat here. It looks a lot more Mass Effect Andromeda than original trilogy if you wanted to go at it from that angle. But one of the most interesting things they mentioned was that there is a recycler kind of weapon, almost a multi-tool of senses, where you will be able to salvage things that you find out in the world and turn that salvage into ammo or some other kinds of usable materials. I like this idea because it kind of takes a little bit of what people think of as combat and turns it into something a bit more productive and just gives you more freedom of gameplay. They also mentioned with combat that there's going to be a lot of stealth sections, so as with many RPGs and even immersive sims, you can choose how you want to tackle a level, either by sneaking through it, blasting your way through it with guns, or even trying to negotiate your way through. Obviously, this is an important part of an RPG for a lot of people, the folks who grew up on games like Mass Effect and Deus Ex, and of course Fallout. And to be quite honest, it would be really disappointing if dialogue was not a big part of this game, so it's glad that every time they talk about it, they bring up these points. Another interesting place they released some info on this was morality. So this is a game that has some interesting quirks to it. The idea is that you're going on these long journeys in which time is dilating and everything behind you is aging as you go out and run your missions. So when you come back from a mission, things will have changed. You could think kind of they're taking a page out of Fable's book if Fable ever really pulled that system off. So as you go and return from your home, there's something they're calling the rot. And this is basically like a gameplay element that's going to make enemies stronger, but it's also going to break down the world around you. And it does feel like because you're leaving for such a long amount of time, you're going to see how that rot affects the world that you are leaving behind. And you're probably going to have to make some choices that you might not be super happy about based around that whole aspect. In addition to this point of morality, there are also these beings called Celestials, and these Celestials leave behind technology and other things in the world. There's a lot of lore there, we'll get into that at another point. But they leave behind what's called remnants. These are little artifacts that you actually search for throughout the game, and they help you to heal your world of the rot and things that are going on. But they also can allow you to unlock maybe other gameplay elements. And one of the biggest aspects of these is that while they're super useful to you in terms of gameplay, they're also really morally gray the way that you're using them. We don't have much detail about that, but this mainly reminds me of the Little Sisters in the BioShock games, where you can use them for a good gameplay element, but you're kind of a dick if you do. In this aspect, they say it's going to lead to a lot of disagreements with your party members, really put down the controller and sit and think kind of decisions, which I love. I think that video games are so much more fun when I find myself struggling to actually progress, not because they're too difficult, because they put me in weird, tough situations. I have to make hard choices. I have to deal with consequences. I think that's what people like about immersive sims, and honestly, RPGs as well. So I'm glad to see that here, and I'm glad they're talking about it so much early on. Speaking of your party members, there are actually going to be a lot of side quests in this game that push forward the main story, but focus on the more personal aspects of your party members' lives. Again, think of like Mass Effect, where you're going out to solve a situation that Garrus has, because Garrus is amazing. He's love, he's life, and you want to keep him in your party. To be honest, from the party members to the sci-fi to the morally great choices to the hero story this is very clearly taking to the space background, the way that party members work. So there are a lot of things here that point towards Mass Effect, but I am excited to see how it differentiates itself. As of right now, it's looking like a really good spot in this golden age of space games we're kind of getting. And if you're into space-based RPGs, I think this is one that will definitely need to be on your list. They have now made it available to wishlist on PlayStation, Xbox, Steam, and Epic. And they've actually thrown up some new key art and screenshots on the website that I've got on the screen here for you to see, just to give you an idea of where that art direction is going. But ultimately, if you've seen the trailers, and if you've been following this game, you can definitely sense that Mass Effect DNA in there. But to be genuinely honest, it's a new age for space RPGs. We haven't seen a lot of takes on this genre in a while, besides Outer Worlds and of course Starfield. And so I'm interested in seeing what is the bar for a AAA style space RPG now. Obviously, as I said, the Outer Worlds has been kind of maintaining that for the last couple of years. But I think with what we're seeing in No Man's Sky and, dare I say it, Star Citizen, just the interactivity that space games are starting to get, I do wonder if a game like this is going to go a little bit further than what we might expect from just your casual space RPG. Either way, I think this is an interesting one. I hope you learned something in this little update. I will keep you advised as we get more info. They said there's going to be more coming out towards the end of the year, so stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.